Welcome to this episode of Pen to Paper Press podcast. I'm Cindy Coaches. I enjoy spending time with best-selling authors, writers, editors, publishers, and the creative souls to talk about the writing process and developing our stories to completing our works of art. Each episode is an opportunity for us to explore mindsets, pearls of wisdoms, and the experiences that began our journey as a writer from the moment we put pen to paper. In this episode, this very unique episode, I am speaking with Cornelia Gamlem and Barbara Mitchell. They have a unique partnership that began when they wrote the Big Book of HR. Since then, they have written the Essential Workplace Conflict Handbook, the Conflict Resolution Phrase Book, the award-winning The Manager's Answer Book, and their latest book, They Did What? Unbelievable Tales from the Workplace. Welcome. I am so grateful to have both of you here. Thank you.
You're so welcome. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Cindy.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Looking forward to it.
All righty. So real quick, so that people can pick up your voices and know who's speaking. Barbara, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into, writing books on HR.
Well, thanks, Cindy. I started in HR after a general business career where I was in finance and operations and marketing, and somebody said you ought to be in HR, and I said, I don't think so. And when I got into HR, I realized it was the right place for me. And so I spent most of my HR career with Marriott International, and then did a couple of startup companies before going into HR consulting. So I've been doing HR for a long time, always wanted to be a writer. I had my bucket list, number 2 on my list was to publish a book. Number 1 was to own my own company, which I did. So this was a lifetime dream. So that's a little bit about me and how I got into writing.
All right. Thank you. That's interesting. I have a friend who, later in her years, realized that HR was where she wanted to spend her time. And she got a master's degree in it. To me, it felt like no time at all. She dove in. It's a passion. And I'm assuming it's a passion for you as well, Cornelia.
Yes, it was. And in fact, it was interesting because I kind of got into HR the same way Barbara did, almost not directly. I hadn't really thought about it. I went back to college after I'd gotten a 2-year degree and worked in the legal field for a couple of years, and then had an opportunity to join a local firm and in their HR department. And it was interesting because I was there about 6 months and had a chance to do a number of different things. And then my assignment was up. And I found myself, looking for a job and landed one with a company, even though I didn't have a lot of experience yet, but walked into a recruiter's position. And from there, I just ended up finding my way into other areas of human resources, and much like Barbara, it wasn't something I set out to do. But once I did it, I realized, this is a great opportunity. And I really, I liked the challenges that it presented. And then from there, after quite a number of years of being in corporate America, like Barbara, I said, really want to try my hand at owning my own business and doing consulting. And that's what led me into the world of consulting. And through that journey, Barbara and I met because we lived close to each other and we were in a lot of the same professional organizations. And, from a friendship developed into this writing partnership. And we're still doing it. As Barbara likes to joke, we still talk to each other after having written 5 books together.
You do have a unique relationship, and in the few times that we have spoken, the thing that I find so interesting is how connected you two are. You literally joined the call about the same time. Uh, Before I hit the record button, you two were talking about, oh, I almost wore my turquoise necklace, and it's so funny how reflective the two of you are. So is that what really brings that unique partnership and makes it work for both of you, or what makes it work for the both of you?
I think, first of all, I would say it's mutual respect for each other. And I think that's a real key to this whole process of working together, obviously. But also, the other thing is that we have even though we are very close friends and sometimes talk to each other, I don't know how many times a day, multiple, but we have very different skill sets. And that's another key to, I think, a writing partnership. If we did the same things exactly the same way, there's no reason to work with a partner. But we respect each other. We like each other. We're friends as well as very, very close colleagues who have different skill sets that complement each other.
Yeah, and I would say, one of the secrets that we learned, I think, early on when we started working on the big book of HR, Barbara had actually signed the contract with the publisher. And when they agreed to it, they didn't give her near the amount of time she knew she needed to write a big book. And she had asked me if I was interested in joining her. And as I looked through the outline and everything, it was very easy to say, okay, these are the areas that you have more experience. These are the areas that I have more experience in. And we just kind of divided the work down the middle and then got out of each other's way. We would check in with each other. We would bounce ideas off of each other. If one of us got stuck someplace, we'd certainly turn to each other. But for the most part, we didn't try to override what the other person was doing. And it worked very well. And, at the end of that first book, one of the things that amazed me is as we were both reading each other's chapters, to me, it was almost seamless that, even though we have slightly different writing styles, nothing clashed. The voice sounded the same. And it was really an amazing opportunity to say, hey, we can do this. We can work together.
So then one question that I have for you, because you mentioned that both of you have different writing styles and you're putting out a book. Did you try to mesh your two writing styles into each chapter, or did you leave each chapter in the author's voice?
I don't think we consciously left it in one person's voice. What we found was our voices were very, very similar. We did not write differently. And we also were very fortunate to work with just a local editor that helped with anything that it didn't sound like it was the same voice. But I don't think that's ever been a challenge for us. I think it could be for some people, but it was amazing to us how seamlessly that seemed to work. And I wish I could tell you what the secret to making that happen is. I don't know. But all I am just very grateful because that was a concern of ours. We didn't want to put out a book where it was either a back and forth or two different styles or having to pay an editor to put it into one voice. That was not what we wanted to do. And so we really were very fortunate to make it work this way.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we discovered is, even in writing, the Big Book of HR was probably the most technical book that we've written. And we still both have somewhat of a conversational style in the way we present the information. And, I would say with the exception of a couple of the chapters that sort of delved in a little bit more to the legal issues that might have been a tad more stilted, everything else just kind of, came together so nicely. And I don't think our voices really clashed anywhere. throughout the book.
That's beautiful,
Yeah.
because, and very unique in the regard that I'm not sure, I can't think of one person that I write very, that I would have that same kind of a partnership with. So yes, it's truly a blessing. And the secret is, there is no secret, because it's
A
just
little bit of luck.
We could probably make something up. We are writers.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, if we did future interviews, we could.
The secret is, yeah, we don't. Yeah, that's probably one of those rabbit holes we as creative individuals probably should not go.
Well, I'm just thinking about one more thing as we're kind of batting this around, and that is neither Cornelia nor I take ourselves very seriously, and we also don't mind being. I'm going to use the word corrected. That's not the right word, but
Critiqued.
Critique. Thank you. A suggestion might be you might want to use this word rather than that word. Neither of us get upset about somebody suggesting that to us. And so there are times when we will maybe go back and forth once or twice with something till we come up with what it should be. But very rarely, normally the way it's written is the way it ends up being presented to the publisher.
But there was one exception to that experience, and that was in the last book that we wrote, They Did What? We started to craft that book right after we finished the big book of HR. And it came about as, a question that had been posed to me one time about how do you learn how to do employee relations, which is, so focused on employees' behavior. And, we decided, gee, wouldn't that be a cool book to write? Get a lot of different scenarios, people's challenges in dealing with employees. And, as we were in the process of collecting all of this great material and great stories, we then had the challenge of how do we put this together? And we decided we really wanted to put it more in a story fashion. So we turned to the genre of creative nonfiction. But that created a lot of challenges for us because, now we weren't just writing straight facts and figures. We had to learn about writing dialogue. We had to learn about character arc and story arc. And that was a whole different process. And, we still started the same way. We decided who would start each chapter, but we would throw, as I kept saying, it was like playing tennis. We kept throwing it over the net back and forth to each other. And I think this was really a testament to us. And as Barbara just said, we didn't mind being critiqued because we could sit down and honestly say, this really doesn't work. Why don't we try this? And there were lots and lots and lots and lots of edits. We worked on that book for years as we kept learning more and more about, the craft of writing and the craft of being more creative in your writing. And that was a feat. That was, and that was the one where we'd really have to say, I think we may need to look at this. But, as somebody was asking me about it recently, and I said, at the end of the day, I couldn't tell you with the exception of a couple of great lines that, each of us came up with. I couldn't tell you who wrote what in that book because we kept changing it off back and forth from each other. So that was really a big feat for us and a big accomplishment.
Sounds like it. That at the end of the day, you recognize the words, but you don't recognize that that's my words or that's her words.
Yeah.
So that is truly a blending. And as you stated before I started recording this, the two of you share a brain. So I love that.
Well, one of the things that when people know us in person, we certainly don't look alike and we don't sound alike, which people are probably noticing on the call today. But we do think alike in 99% 95, 98%. I don't know what the number would be. And so that's the piece that really has worked. But we are, and now, we live a couple of thousand miles apart. We used to live a couple of miles apart, and that was a little easier for collaboration, but we haven't missed a beat since Cornelia moved away to New Mexico.
One of the things, your focus on your books is HR. And obviously that's a lot of technical writing. Is that where more of your strengths are? Since you mentioned, Cornelia mentioned that having to learn the creative nonfiction writing, is the technical writing something that has been a strong suit for both of you then?
I would say so, although I think we both, now that we've had an exposure to the creative nonfiction, both are interested perhaps in doing more of that, or even maybe doing fiction at some point, although that's a dream of mine for sure. But the writing that we do for our HR books, pure nonfiction writing, I frequently find myself saying that it's easier. It's not easy, but it's easier because you research and you write, and you research and you write, and you don't create, as Cornelia mentioned earlier, you don't have to create characters, you don't have to create all of the things that fiction asks you to do in order to make a successful story. So to me, it's a very different way of writing, obviously. And one of the things where we are different, if you want to get into some of the ways we're different, is that I am very much, we both love the research part of it, but I am somebody that will never stop researching. I drive Cornelia crazy. We'll just be honest about this, with not wanting to finish something.
Yes, you do.
We are being honest. Okay, so I drive her crazy because I'm always, yes, but we could add this, or why don't we do this, rather than, okay, and she'll say, we have a deadline. That's why save it for the next book becomes a favorite phrase of ours. So writing nonfiction the research is fascinating to me, as well as then the writing comes pretty easy because we've got facts and figures and a solid, something to share that it's very, very solid. In the They Did What, our book that is the creative nonfiction, we had to create all of the things we've already talked about, but there was nothing that had to be exactly the same. We could add to it, which we did. We took part of story A and made it part of story B and did all kinds of things like that for a couple of reasons, one of which was so we wouldn't get sued by the people that gave us the stories, which was a pretty good reason to add things to it. But that's very different from writing a book like the Big Book of HR, where you talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act and what it means for an organization.
Yeah, and I would say in my HR background, when I was working in a corporate role, I did do a lot of writing, and a lot of writing around many of the issues that are covered in the Big Book of HR. So, as Barbara said, that, writing some of that stuff was easy. For me, a lot of it was, I know this, I just want to go research. I want to go to the original source, make sure that there isn't anything new, make sure I'm putting, the most up-to-date information, especially around, again, some of the legal and regulatory issues that we cover in the book. But, but even beyond that, I had taught HR classes. So I was very comfortable with just sort of taking a lot of information and synthesizing it down. And, whether I was doing that through lecture or or just, sitting there and writing it. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge. For Barbara, it was saying the research. For me, I'd want to dig real deep into a subject because I understood it. And then I'd have to sit back and say, wait a minute, you're writing this book for a broader audience and you want to be able to put it, you want it to be conversational, as we said earlier. You don't want to bore people with, a lot of very, very technical terms. Even though there were some places you had to cover a lot of technical terms, but you tried to do it in a way that was just easy on the reader, and I think that was the challenge. I think that between us, those were the challenges that we had. We knew where to go to get the information, but then you had to kind of step back and say, we need to put it out there in a fashion that's going to attract people, so people will buy the book.
Right, and the one thing that came up for me when you were speaking is the fact that the two of you have the corporate experience, you have various experiences. So not only is the research a key element, but so is your experience in those roles and in the various aspects and in communication with the others in your field. And yes, changing the names, the places, and so forth to protect the innocent or the guilty.
Definitely the guilty.
Yes.
Not that I'm in HR, and again, I have my friend who dove in headfirst and ran with it. I would be very curious to learn or to read about the unbelievable tales from the workplace, because I've seen some stuff that's kind of like, whoa, what?
Uh-huh.
And you two, having been in the field, what I've seen is probably just like maybe scratching barely the top of the surface. So
Well, that's one of the reasons we wanted to write this book, the They Did What book, because we knew that most people have a clue the kinds of things that HR people have to deal with on a daily basis. And so we tried to tell stories, and we didn't make anything up. Let's just be real clear about that. We did not. Everything we talk about happened either to one of us or to the people that we interviewed. But we really tried to send a message that HR people on any given day might have to deal with something that is absolutely, totally, that they've never, ever encountered before. And they have to just do it seamlessly. And people tell us all the time, or we use the line too, that we couldn't have made this up.
No, I'm sure that there's a lot of it. It's that kind of sits you down and makes you say, wow, what just happened and who did what? And wow.
You got it.
Yeah, sometimes reality is more interesting than fictional work anyway. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I frequently say that this is the book that every HR person has threatened to write during his or her career, and we did it. So
I like that. Oh, it's kind of like there's the saying that careful what you do, I may kill you off in a book or something like that, or don't anger me, I could kill you off slowly in a book. The writer's sword. Yeah, the HR sword.
But seriously, people joke about the HR sword and what HR does, and HR terminates people, and what. One of the messages we wanted to send across loud and clear is people put themselves into situations sometimes where, and it's not HR, but it's the management that has to make the decisions that say, this person just, has either got to change their evil ways, if you will, or just it's time to leave the organization because it's just not a good fit, and this kind of behavior just really isn't acceptable in the organization. And and that was one of the other things that we hope people, especially the non-HR, the non-management reader, takes from this book, is that I didn't realize that all of these things happened, and there was a lot more that happens below the surface than what may be noticeable to the average employee out there. And a lot goes into the decision making. It's not, as we said, one of the themes was, it's not black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray when you're dealing with employee misbehavior, and we hope that HR people can pick this book up and say, hey, this happens in other places too. I thought this just happened in my organization, and gee, I would have handled this way. Oh, look at this. I wasn't too far off the mark given what the policies and the practices are in my company. So, we hope that it's a good learning experience for them, and for people managers, that, you've got to confront some of these issues, and, confront them when you first notice that something may be a little bit off, because there's a much better opportunity to correct some of the behavior, or to get the employee help in some cases.
Right. So what is one of the consistent messages that you've carried through your books that you have penned together?
It's a great question.
Yes, it is. I think I'd start with, HR isn't as straightforward as a field as people may think it is. Pick up the big book of HR and look at the amount of information in that, and the amount of information that an HR person needs to know, or a small business owner needs to know, because they're dealing with people too.
And I would add to that the books that we've written, and you rattled off the titles in the intro, we've written books on conflict management, and also one of our award-winning book, which we love to talk about, and it's called The Manager's Answer Book. And I think it kind of capsulizes one of the themes that goes through all of our books, and that is managers, people that have to deal with people issues. And that could be a small business, it could be a director, a VP, whatever, at whatever size organization. Every issue you come across as a manager is probably going to be a little bit different from the last one that you dealt with. But I think some of the common themes that we talk about are managers have to be good listeners. They have to model good behavior so that employees know that they don't want to end up in they did what, the second edition that we're maybe going to write someday. So if managers learn how to listen to their employees, take positive action, model good behavior, and then use good conflict management skills, it will make for a much better combination of manager-employee relationship, which is basically what we talk about in all of our books.
Interesting. And I, again, being someone who's been in the employee seat and not knowing I know what the role of an HR director is, but I don't know the behind the scenes because I'm not trained in that arena, and I don't work in that office. I just never have. I've had to report things to HR. I know those things. I've had, HR call me up and say, hey, we need you to, complete XYZ forms for XYZ. And so me being on the employee side of things, the benefit of reading these books, especially the unbelievable tales, they did what? That would be interesting to get that insight, just to get that knowledge of behind the scenes. Another question that I really am curious about, and the word legal has been brought up a handful of times in a different aspect. But there is the legality of the fact that you two are working as a partnership. So, do you guys have an agreement? I'm assuming you have a legal binding agreement. Am I correct in that assumption, or am I like way off in left field?
We do not have a formal agreement. We have never needed one, and I don't see us getting to that point. I don't know.
And I mean, the agreement that we do, the agreements that we have, not with each other, but with our publisher. Obviously, we have, of all we self-published. They did what? All of the rest of the books, were through a traditional publisher. So, it's. I think we recognize in the beginning we're in this 50-50. We get 50% of the proceeds that of any royalties that come out of it. We split the responsibilities down the middle 50-50. And we're bound by the terms of our contract with the publisher. But beyond that, I think I'm kind of with Barbara. We've never really seen the need to do it because as we said earlier, we have a lot of respect for each other's expertise, but we also honor a lot of things like meeting deadlines and splitting the work and kind of staying out of each other's way. If it's I'm not going to start nosing around her chapters on recruiting, which is where she's expert. Unless it's to provide a suggestion or, oh gee, I just saw this interesting article. Let me forward it to you. You may be able to use it in the book. But, and again, other than if I'm reading through drafts and all, I may say, this doesn't sound clear. Do you mind if I make a suggestion, or do you mind if I change it? Or you got a couple of typos here. But we've pretty much stayed out of each other's way, I think, and respect the fact that we do have different areas of expertise.
So what is some wisdom that you would share for somebody who is, you've already shared some, but what is a foundational bit of advice that you would give to, two writers that are looking to do what you've done, which is, create this partnership and work together?
I think, and we've talked about this a lot. People have asked us questions similar to what you just asked, Cindy, but questions like, wasn't it recently, Cornelia, somebody told you she was going to put a notice up on a bulletin board somewhere looking for a co-author?
Yes, somebody asked me, how did you find a co-author? I think I need one. And I was like, well, I didn't really, in one sense, she found me, but we knew each other when we started down this journey. It isn't that we just kind of bumped into each other at a writing group and said, oh, let's write a book together. We had worked together before through some professional organizations. When Barbara had a consulting firm, I did some work for the firm. We collaborated on some other client projects. A couple of times I had a project come to me and I would bring her in because I need her expertise. So, we already had some of that understanding going. So I think from that perspective, we were very, very unique in that we started from an established base and were able to move into this, recognizing where each other's strengths and weaknesses were too.
I would strongly suggest if anybody is thinking about this, and I would imagine maybe they're thinking about it because they're listening to this podcast, that you start out with getting to know each other as you can, with a lot of conversation about writing style, about what your goals are, but then coming up with some working relationship kinds of things. I think the biggest one of all is that you honor each other's work, so that you don't try to rewrite or critique. While Cornelia frequently will give me great suggestions about things, she's never taken something I've written and rewritten it and done something with it. So kind of how you honor each other's expertise. And most of all, it is being able to have some sort of a process. And I suppose since we've written books on conflict, that if we ever had a conflict, we pretty much know how to work through it in order to come out the other end, still being able to work together. I hope we could do that. And we've never tested that theory.
We haven't.
I hope we don't ever do it, but we could. One of the just an aside, one of the books that we've written is a book that's 2,000 phrases to use in conflict resolution situations. So we've got all kinds of ways to get started with resolving conflict. It was one of our fun books to write, especially the last two chapters about never say this or always say this in a conflict situation. But getting back to the relationship, I don't see that it has to be in writing, but you certainly need to talk about it. If we do have a conflict, how are we going to resolve it? Yeah. If something does come up, we've had situations, and they fortunately for us have been minor, but what if in the middle of a deadline on a book, somebody got sick, or we we had a situation that was sort of unique in that we both moved in the middle of a very tight deadline on a book, and we figured out a way to make it happen. It wasn't fun, it wasn't easy, but we did it. And nobody knew pretty much other than the two of us what we were dealing with. So it's the honesty, it is the clarifying what your relationship's going to be and how you're going to work it out if and when something comes up that is out of the ordinary.
And I would say the other thing that I think we've done very well in the beginning, we said we should do weekly check-ins, and we did that by having a standard meeting at a restaurant where we ended up having our own table because the one woman that worked there absolutely adored us because we were there every week. And, when I moved, we kept that up. We have a weekly phone call. And, there are some weeks that we have tons of things to talk about. Well, sometimes it's just a lot of stuff to talk about because stuff is going on, but, a lot of things to talk about around the work. And, and then other weeks, it may be, we've got like about a half an hour of things to talk about. And so the conversations are shorter, but I think that constant connection, that constant communication is what really helps. And, if you just can't do this in a vacuum. You can't ignore the other person if you're going to get into some kind of a relationship like this.
Mm-hmm. And that, when you mentioned the young lady questioning if she should post it on a bulletin board, writer seeking partner, kind of a post, to me, that would set up a red flag in regards to setting yourself up for a potential hazardous situation. Mm-hmm. Because like what was mentioned at the very, very beginning of the podcast was respect. Mm-hmm. And respect is not something that is immediate. Respect is something that is earned. It is something that is a give and take. And it's something, yes, it's immediate, but it develops over time, and you gain that trust, and you learn where, like you two have mentioned, which is the give and take and the ability to communicate, which is obviously very clear because, for one, and I was really wondering how this would work interviewing two people. Would I be over talking and stepping on, overstepping and talking on one, over top of one of you, or if the two of you would be, overstepping and talking over the other person. And it's really interesting how the three of us have taken our turns. Mm-hmm. And that is very important in that line of communication because we're listening and we're sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And, yes, that is the role of an HR director, to listen. And
That's
then
sort of who we are. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But to your point, Cindy, I would honestly say if someone who's listening to this or at some point listens to this, if you're thinking about this as to work with someone that you don't know, it's a brand new relationship where you may have something where you think you have complementary skills, but you really don't know. I would say then I think you probably do need some sort of a written down, signed by each of you as to how you're going to operate. We didn't need to do that because we had a unique situation where we really knew each other well already. But I think if I hadn't known Cornelia and I had said to her, help, I've got to write this 90,000 word book in 5 months, and I thought I was going to get a year to do it. But anyway, if I hadn't known her then, I think I probably would have wanted to have some, okay, you're going to do this and you're going to, dividing it up so that it was in writing so that there's no way that we could come back and not deliver what I had promised to deliver. So if it's a new situation or it's someone you don't know, strongly suggest that it doesn't have to be with a lawyer or it could be, but it wouldn't have to be. You could do it yourself. Just come up with things that you think would be important, sign it, and just have it. So if you need it, you've got it.
Yeah, the clarity.
It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
And what I had found interesting that day that woman asked me about it, I asked her why she thought she needed a co-author. She really didn't know. I mean, she could not articulate it to me. And I just thought to myself, whoa, you got to tread very, very carefully. And I think I'd said to her, I would give it some thought if I were you. What is it why is it that you're feeling this? Maybe it's just a good editor you need to go and find who can sort of help you shape up what it is you're doing. But she was really struggling just to explain to me why she thought she needed somebody to help her with this book. And Barbara and I have said many times, I mean, we enjoy working together. We've been doing it for a while, but there probably isn't one of these books that, of all of them, either one of us could have written any of these books by ourselves if we had the time and the resources to do it. With, like she said, with the first one, the resource of time is really what kind of pulled us together. And
or lack of time.
Well, time, yeah. It was really that and then it kind of just, we started talking about they did what, and then our publisher came along with another idea, and always presented it to both of us. It was never like, well, Cornelia, you take this one, and it worked well for us. But as Barbara said, we knew each other, and we knew we could depend on each other as well, and that was the other thing I said to this woman, and I kind of got the sense she really did need an editor, but she didn't want to pay for an editor. And it's like, well, you got to sort out where you're going with this. And, but just don't think that, you can meet somebody, and this happened to be at a writers group meeting. Don't think you're going to be able to just meet somebody here and it's going to be, instant karma and you're going to go off and write together, because there is a lot to it.
There is. And the one thing that kind of came up was the fact that you have to develop that relationship. And you're right. Why is she hesitant and of not doing it herself? And why is she looking for that second person? Is it a self-confident issue? Is it she's looking for somebody to pick up her pieces that she's not able to fulfill? Mm-hmm. And yes, she may have simply needed an editor. And that's one thing that I have found is that you would think that people would be grateful to pay an editor for what they do, but it seems to be one of those things that, well, I know I can use I'll use Grammarly, or I'll use one of these, uh, apps on the documents to fix and correct. And what they're not realizing is when you invest in an editor, oh, so much can open up. So
I had this conversation just yesterday with someone about the value of a good editor. And there are different levels of editors, and we could go on and on about some of our experiences, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But a good editor, I just adore those people, because anybody that can make what I write better is worth everything. And I never, ever mind that kind of editing. It's the ones that want to rewrite to their own specification,
to their own voice,
or to their own voice, that especially when you're writing nonfiction, and it is fact. You can't change facts.
But we did, when we first started working on They Did What, we did identify somebody who helped us. She was really took the role more of a developmental editor, because we had a bunch of chapters written, and we were trying to figure out, first of all, can this get shaped up into what we were envisioning? And she was, we told her we don't want line editing at this point. We know it's filled with grammatical errors and typos and everything, but she was very helpful in sort of looking at things and saying, this is dragging here. You've got too much backstory here. Gave us a lot of good advice. Yes, brought some of her own opinions into it, and we said thank you very much. But it was having that level of expertise in the beginning of the process. As we progressed through, it really helped us to say, well, wait a minute, are we making the same mistake here as we're starting on a new chapter? And, that's a whole different kind of editing. And, I think for us, it was because we had never ventured into this kind of a book before, it was very, very helpful. And that's, that's why I would tell people, if you're unsure, research some of the other resources that are available to you. And also realize that not every editor does the same kind of editing, and, find the editor, a good one that does the kind of work that you need at that point in your project.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So, is there anything that you wanted to share before we wrap up this episode?
I think the only other thing I would say, what's important in a partnership, a lot of times you have deadlines imposed on you, particularly if you're working, with a traditional publisher. But even putting deadlines in place, again, it took us 9 years to finish They Did What, and we had a lot of interruptions along the way. But if we were starting to get into it, it would be okay. By this date, we want to have this much done, or we want to have these rewrites done. And and we held each other accountable to that, and I think that was really, really important, because it gave us just a good foundation along with everything else that we had.
Cornelia is being very generous with what she just talked about, because there is one of us, and it is I, who never gets to a deadline unless I have someone like Cornelia saying, we've got till Tuesday to get this done. Will you? And I always meet the deadlines, but I make everybody else around me crazy, and I know that. But
well, you stop making me crazy at this point. I know she'll meet them, so I just leave her alone.
Yeah. But you do remind me,
mm-hmm.
and that's very public. I need that, and I acknowledge it, and it works.
It's the partnership.
There you go.
Magic.
Yeah.
It's the magic that makes it work. Oh, so where can the listeners find you on the internet?
our website is bigbookofhr.com, where you can find anything at all about us and all of our books and all of the things that we do in addition to the books that we do. And you can actually order the books for any of the online booksellers, as well as we love to promote independent bookstores, perhaps in your neighborhood. If they don't stock our books, ask if they could order it for you.
We have links on the website to numerous different places. We have a page for each one of the books, and we just make it easy. If you want the book, go here. And we do, we would encourage you to promote to support the independent sellers as well. And there's links there.
Agreed. Because it's the independent businesses that, that's our foundation.
That's right.
Really is.
Yes, and they are our biggest supporters as well as writers.
Yes.
Because if they didn't support us, they wouldn't be in that business.
Absolutely.
We talk about that a lot. Yep. We got to support each other. So, because that's how we're going to get ahead and maintain. So, thank you for taking time and hanging out with me here in the quote-unquote virtual studio, aka my camper. So my home on wheels. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been really fun to talk about our partnership, and hopefully it's helpful to your listeners. So thank you.
You are welcome.
Appreciated the opportunity, Cindy. Very grateful for it.
You are very welcome. And you gals, take care. And thank you. Hey there. Before we end our time together, I would like to say thank you for your continued support and taking the time to listen to the powerful messages weaved within this conversation. To learn more about Cornelia and Barb, access their website by visiting the show notes for this episode at pentopaperpress.com/podcast. To receive future episodes in your inbox, subscribe to the Pen to Paper Press newsletter and subscribe on your favorite podcast application. Take care, and until next time, keep your pen to paper and write. And understand that your words have power and your story matters. Bye for now.